Hi everybody, my name is Sean. I also go by 220Hz on Steam. I'm a hobby asset creator for City Skylines. And I'm doing this video to run through a very simple project that you can do even if you've never actually done any sort of asset creation or modding before. I'm going to ask that you probably brush up a little bit on how to manipulate things basically in Blender, which is one of the applications we're going to be using, but otherwise you should be able to follow along and see what's going on without too much difficulty. I get a lot of requests to make this or that thing, particularly when it comes to people that want to customize their cities. Say, well, recently I've been asked to do a bunch of signs of restaurant logos or just generic, text-based 3D things, and these aren't very hard to do. So I am going to do a subway logo. So I went to Wikipedia here, and I found the most recent iteration of the subway logo, and I want to get an SVG file of it. Now, SVGs aren't like JPEGs or PNGs, they're vector images as opposed to raster images, and that just means that they're mathematical representations of the image as opposed to a container file with a bunch of pixel data in it. They're generally considered the best way to deliver things like finished logos, because they can be scaled infinitely and printed or turned into other objects without losing any quality. Like, what happens when you blow up a JPEG 4 times, it gets resampled and then it looks like garbage. SVGs. So on here I'm going to select the original file. I've already downloaded it. It's on my desktop here. So there it is. I'm going to be using 3 applications. They're all free. Inkscape is what I'm going to be using to manipulate my vector image before I get it into Blender, and maybe I might have to do some other stuff with it later on, but I'll see. I'm using Blender obviously for our 3D stuff, and GIMP is our image manipulator. These two, if you have Photoshop and Illustrator and you know your way around them, what I'm doing should probably make sense, but I can't afford those 2 things anymore, so this is what I'm using. And also I will say, if you're on Mac, Inkscape is a capable program, but it has some performance issues. The developers know about that, but whatever, we're not going to be spending too much time in it. Okay, so like I said, subway logo. I'm going to bring up Inkscape here and bring the subway logo in, and this is going to take a little, actually I might as well just do it the proper way. I was doing a YMCA thing there not too long ago. Subway logo, open. All right. Now there's some considerations before you actually get it into Blender and start working with it. We're going to be importing this SVG directly into Blender and turning it into a 3D object there. Now, in some cases you might have a bunch of shapes on top of shapes, and the more detailed this SVG is when you import it, the more curves it has, the more vertices it's going to generate when it's actually turned into a 3D object. I don't think we actually need to do any cleanup here. We could probably just start working with it right away. But just to be safe, I'm going to try to do an ungroup. So we have 2 objects now. They've been ungrouped under object here. And I'm wondering if I can try to do a union here. Yeah, okay, so under path, union, this just converts it all into one single vector object. And it's an outline. We don't actually need the colors here just yet. So I'm going to save that as, I'm just going to call it subway outline, because that's what we're going to be using it for. Subway outline SVG. Great. We can forget about Inkscape for now. Let's go into Blender. So in Blender, you can directly import scalable vector graphics. So I do that, and I'll go to my desktop, subway outline, import SVG. Okay, so just to give you the briefest rundown of how to manipulate stuff, the viewport in Blender, if you hold down the middle mouse button, you will orbit. If you hold down shift middle mouse, you'll pan, zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. You've also got your numpad keys. 1 gives you a front view, 3 is a side view, 7 is a top view. And if we're looking straight down on this from the top view, you can see that the way this has been imported, it's sort of facing the sky, I guess, for lack of a better term. All right, now before we do anything else with it, we're going to go over here and check our outliner. And you'll see this curly thing right here. This indicates that this isn't actually a mesh in the traditional sense. It's a curve mesh. So we need to convert that into an actual mesh before we start working with it, unwrapping it, and that sort of thing. In order to do that, we go up to Object, Convert to Mesh from Curve Metasurf Text. This is a curve. And then now we can start to work with it. Right now I'm in object mode. I'm assuming you probably know about this, but you can tab between object mode and edit mode if you want to edit these vertices, move them around and stuff. All right. I'm also going to delete the material that was brought in with it, because when you import an SVG, it does take a look at that and creates a material based on what color it was, that sort of thing. I'm just going to remove that. Okay, so now when we look at this, this is a hot mess. There's a ton of geometry here that we probably don't want. So we're going to have to simplify this. As we're building a prop, we're going to try to keep our try count well below 1,000. 1,000, if you try to make a prop with any more than 1,000 triangles in it, the game is going to complain. It's a good practice to try to stay as far below that as possible. So in order to do that, we're going to apply a decimate modifier to it. Modifiers, if you don't know, are basically like filters for 3D objects. I guess that's the simplest way to explain it. So if you click on this little wrench over here, add modifier, decimate, and I'm just going to tab into wireframe mode so you can see the edges disappearing as I scale this down. Under the collapse tab, I'm just going to move this bar down. You can see them start to disappear. We're going to lose density and we're also going to lose quality of this 3D object, but it doesn't matter. I think you'll see, try to get this down to less than, starting to get there. It's a very curvy mesh. 219, that's too much. I think you move it down as long as your right angles stay right angles. That's probably as good as you're going to get it. We could probably further decimate this S or the W. I guess this is just a function of it being a very curvy logo, but this is probably good. So I'm going to apply this modifier. All right, now our curves or our tries have gone down from, what was it before? 3,000. Again, we'll decimate, all right. We've gone from 3,000 tries down to 165. Okay, now we're talking. So there's still a couple of unnecessary vertices here, and looks like we've got an issue going on here. But that's fine. Now I'm going to do a limited dissolve of this object here, and to do that I would go under Mesh, Clean Up, Limited Dissolve. This turns all the triangles into n-gons and attempts to generally clean up whatever you might not need. So this is still a problem here. So I'm going to go under Vertex Selection and delete that vertex. And then I can get rid of this. That operation there, I hit X, and then I did dissolve vertices because it was just kind of loose. It didn't need to be there. All right. So now I'm going to rotate this along the x-axis by pressing R and then X 90 degrees. So now when we look at it from the front view, it's facing the right way. I'm going to transform, change these transforms so that it's zeroed off and it's dead center in our 3D world here in Blender. Okay, that's good for now. So how big is this if I was to import this into the game right now? How big would it be? I'm going to use another building as reference. So I have one saved. Now you can export any asset from the game using mod tools, and it's really not that difficult to do. I've got a couple OJB files of some stuff from the workshop, some stores and stuff that I've just been sort of eyeballing to get a reference. Where is it here? River Park. Everybody knows the River Park set. They're great. Rico's. The 3.4. Alright, so this is a game asset scaled to probably how it should be scaled. And as you can see, my subway sign is pretty tiny. I'll just direct your attention to this orange dot here in the center. This is what's known as the origin of the object. And where things are going to show up is generally in relation to this origin. So in edit mode, if I press G to grab and then move along the y-axis, you'll see that the origin doesn't change. But if I'm in edit or object mode and I move it along the y-axis, you'll see that that goes with it. That's fine. It's just something we're going to have to keep an eye on, where our origin is in relation to the rest of the mesh that we're going to be importing. So I'm going to move this to the front of the store, moving along the y-axis, GY, and then GZ to move it along the z-axis. I'm just going to scale it up so that it's not wee. It's going to be a massive subway. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's fine. And now I'm going to snap it to the front of the store. So I press Z to go into wireframe, and under my snap options, I'm going to snap to vertex, snap closest. I'm going to make sure that my pivot is my bounding box center. I want to snap it to this face right here, so I'm going to find a vertex that's on that. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Find a vertex that's on that and snap it there. GY, and turn on snapping, GY. You'll see it should be snapped, snugged right along the front there. Great. So now if we import this, that's how big it's going to be. You get a pretty good visual. And now that we know that, we don't need the store anymore, so I'm just going to hide it. And because we've scaled it in object mode, we can take a look over here and see that our scale actually is 73, and it should be 1 if we wanted to import at the scale that we see it. So to do that, we would go to Object, and then Apply, and then we're going to apply the scale. So that resets all of these to 1. So now it's actually the right size. Great. And from here, we're going to extrude it. Actually, I'm going to bring that store up just a bit so I can get a good idea of how it's going to look. Select everything, press E and then Y, and then we're going to turn off snapping and just move it out till it looks about right. That's probably fine. Okay, great.